I was living a life that many would envy. At 50 years old, I had built a successful business that provided not just for me but for my wife, Ashley, who was 35 and vibrant with life. We lived in a beautiful home, surrounded by wealth and the trappings of a comfortable lifestyle. Friends and family often remarked on how lucky I was to have Ashley by my side. She was intelligent, charming, and had a passion for fashion that seemed to light up her every endeavor. We shared laughter and dreams, and for a long time, I believed that our marriage was built on a solid foundation of love and trust. But as the years passed, I began to notice subtle changes in Ashley's behavior. Initially, I dismissed them as the normal ebb and flow of a busy marriage. She started devoting more time to her fashion line, often attending late-night meetings and social gatherings to network. I was proud of her ambition and wanted to support her, even if it meant spending less time together. However, with each passing week, her late nights became more frequent, and the warmth that once filled our home started to fade. I remember a particular night when she returned home after midnight, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers. She claimed to have been out with clients, but when I asked her about the meeting, she grew evasive. Her eyes darted away, avoiding my gaze. It was nothing important, she said dismissively, her voice lacking its usual warmth. In that moment, a seed of doubt was planted in my mind, but I chose to ignore it, wanting desperately to believe in the love we had cultivated over the years. Days turned into weeks, and the nagging feeling in my gut grew stronger. I began to notice more signs, her phone constantly buzzing with notifications, the way she would quickly hide it whenever I entered the room, and her sudden obsession with her appearance. She had always cared about her looks, but now it seemed almost excessive. She would spend hours getting ready for what she claimed were business meetings, often wearing outfits that left little to the imagination. I tried to shake off the thoughts racing through my mind, telling myself that I was being paranoid, that I was simply projecting my insecurities onto her. Yet, every time I confronted her about my feelings, she brushed me off, accusing me of being controlling or insecure. "You're just jealous," she would say, rolling her eyes. "I'm just trying to make a name for myself." I wanted to support her, to be the husband she deserved, but my heart was heavy with suspicion, and I felt increasingly isolated. The woman I had fallen in love with seemed to be slipping away, replaced by someone I barely recognized. It wasn't until the night of the charity gala that everything came crashing down. The event was lavish, filled with the elite of our city, business owners, influencers, and socialites all gathered under one roof to showcase their wealth and goodwill. I hoped it would be an opportunity for Ashley and me to reconnect, to remind ourselves of the love we once shared. But as we arrived, I noticed that Ashley seemed more interested in mingling with other guests than spending time with me. Throughout the evening, she flitted from one group to another, laughing and engaging in conversations while I stood awkwardly by myself. Each time I attempted to engage her, she would deflect my attention, turning back to the people she was chatting with. It was as if I were invisible, a mere accessory to her glamorous life. I felt a knot tightening in my stomach as I realized how much distance had grown between us. At one point, she excused herself, claiming she needed to make a quick phone call. I watched her walk away, the fabric of her dress hugging her curves as she disappeared into the crowd. I tried to distract myself with the conversations around me, but an unsettling feeling tugged at my conscience. I decided to follow her, hoping to reassure myself that she was simply handling business. As I stepped outside onto the terrace, I froze. There, in the dim light, I saw her surrounded by 4 men, their laughter echoing in the night air. My heart raced as I watched her lean into one of them, a smile stretching across her face that I hadn't seen directed at me in months. They looked so comfortable together, too comfortable. My blood ran cold when I saw one of the men pull her closer, whispering something in her ear before planting a kiss on her neck. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from beneath me. I stood frozen, my mind reeling as I witnessed my wife betraying me in the most public of ways. How could she? How could she do this to me, to us? The shock coursed through my veins, paralyzing me with a mix of rage and despair. I wanted to confront her right there, to scream and demand answers, but I couldn't move. Instead, I retreated, my heart shattering with every step I took away from that scene. When I returned inside, I tried to gather my thoughts. The night that was supposed to rekindle our connection had turned into a nightmare. I watched her laugh and flirt, my heart heavy with betrayal, the taste of despair bitter on my tongue. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but I needed to think clearly. I couldn't let her see how much her actions had affected me, not yet. I forced myself to engage with other guests, putting on a brave face while my mind was consumed by the images I had just witnessed. As the gala drew to a close, I knew this was just the beginning. I could no longer pretend that everything was fine. I needed to confront the reality of our marriage and the woman I thought I knew. The trust one had once held so dearly was shattered, and I was left to pick up the pieces of my broken heart. Little did I know, the truth would unravel in ways I could never have imagined. The days that followed the gala felt like a blur, each one dragging on with a weight that made it hard to breathe. I could hardly concentrate at work, my mind constantly drifting back to that night on the terrace. Each time I replayed the scene in my head, a new wave of anger and disbelief washed over me. How had I been so blind? My life had become a fractured mirror, and I was struggling to see the reflection of the man I once was. Ashley returned home the day after the gala, cheerful and full of energy. She greeted me with a kiss that felt like ice against my lips, the warmth long gone. I tried to act normal, to engage in the usual small talk, but it felt hollow. I needed answers, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I watched her as she flitted around the house, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. Later that evening, as we sat across from each other at dinner, I decided it was time to confront her. The tension in the air was palpable, and I could see the shadows of unease flickering across her face as I brought up the charity gala. "Ashley," I began, trying to keep my voice steady, "I saw you talking to those men the other night." Her demeanor shifted instantly. "Oh, come on, Michael. You're really going to bring this up?" "It was a charity event, I was just being friendly." She waved her hand dismissively, attempting to brush off my concerns. "Friendly?" I echoed incredulously. "You were practically flirting with them. I saw you lean into one of them, and he kissed you. What were you thinking?" My voice rose, betraying the anger I'd been trying to contain. "I don't know what you're talking about. You're making a big deal out of nothing," she snapped, her eyes narrowing. "You're just jealous because I was having a good time. I can't believe you're acting like this." The defensiveness in her tone ignited a fire within me. "Jealous? You think this is about jealousy? It's about trust, Ashley. You've been distant for months, and now I see you acting like this with other men. I deserve an explanation." Her face twisted in irritation, and I could see the annoyance in her eyes. "You're being ridiculous. I've told you 1,000 times I'm busy with work. Why can't you just trust me?" Trust. The word hung heavy between us, a cruel reminder of everything that had been lost. "Because you've given me no reason to trust you." I shot back, my heart racing as I felt the walls closing in. Silence enveloped the room, thick and suffocating. I could see her frustration boiling beneath the surface, but instead of admitting anything, she crossed her arms defiantly. "You're just being controlling. You can't dictate who I talk to. Maybe if you paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have to find companionship elsewhere." Her words struck me like a physical blow. I felt a mix of anger and sorrow well up within me, a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't control. "Companionship? You mean cheating?" I said, my voice low and shaky. "Is that how you justify it?" She shrugged, her expression hardening. "Maybe you should take a look at yourself, Michael. You've been so wrapped up in your business that I've felt alone for years. Maybe I'm just finding what I need elsewhere." With those words, it became painfully clear, she was deflecting the blame onto me. My heart sank as I realized I was fighting an uphill battle. I had trusted her with my heart, my life, and she was turning that trust into a weapon against me. I didn't know how much longer I could keep this up. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. I was filled with a sense of hopelessness that I couldn't shake. As I lay in bed that night, I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight. I replayed our conversation over and over in my mind, searching for clues that might explain how things had spiraled so far out of control. The next morning, I made a decision. I needed to gather evidence, not just for my peace of mind, but to protect myself. I couldn't confront her again without solid proof of her betrayal. I began by checking her phone while she was in the shower. It felt invasive, but desperation drove me. I found text messages with various men, filled with flirtation and intimate details. My heart sank further as I realized that this was more than just a few innocent chats. I started to document everything, her late nights, the phone calls she received, the texts I found. It felt like I was piecing together a puzzle of betrayal, and with every new piece, my sense of betrayal deepened. I also reached out to a close friend and shared my suspicions. His shocked reaction confirmed what I had feared all along. I wasn't imagining things. Over the next few days, I continued to gather information. Each new revelation cut deeper, leaving me feeling raw and exposed. I discovered that she had been meeting one of the men, a colleague from her fashion line, on multiple occasions under the guise of business meetings. The realization that she was not just flirting but actively engaging in an affair made my heart ache. I was terrified, angry, and deeply hurt. But I also felt empowered. I was no longer in the dark, allowing her to manipulate my emotions. I had concrete evidence of her betrayal, and it was time to confront her again. After days of gathering evidence and planning my next steps, I felt a surge of determination. I couldn't continue living a lie, pretending that everything was fine. It was time to confront Ashley and demand answers. I decided to wait until we were both home for dinner, hoping to create a calm atmosphere for what I anticipated would be an explosive conversation. As the evening approached, I prepared myself mentally. I set the table, tried to act normal, but my heart raced with anxiety. Ashley arrived home, dressed in a form-fitting outfit that caught my eye but also stoked my anger. I could sense the disconnect between us, the tension palpable in the air. Once we sat down to eat, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "Ashley, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but low. She looked up from her plate, her expression shifting from surprise to annoyance. "Can't this wait?" "I'm tired, Michael," she replied, her tone dismissive. "No, it can't," I insisted. "I saw the texts on your phone, and I know you've been meeting that guy from work. This has gone too far." Her eyes widened momentarily before she masked her surprise with defiance. "You went through my phone? Seriously? How low can you get?" "It's not about that. It's about you betraying my trust," I shot back, my voice rising. "You're lying to me, and I deserve to know why." "Why?" she scoffed, her face twisted in disbelief. "You think this is easy for me? I didn't ask for this situation. You're always working, always gone. I felt lonely, Michael. You don't get to put the blame on me when you've checked out of our marriage." "Lonely?" I repeated incredulously. "So cheating on your husband is your solution? That's your excuse for betraying me with multiple men?" Her eyes flickered with a mix of anger and guilt. "You don't understand the pressures I face. You think I wanted to hurt you? You've been so focused on your company, you never noticed me slipping away." The accusation stung. I had poured my life into building my business, but I had done it for us. I wanted to provide her with a good life, yet here I was, hearing that I was the reason for her betrayal. "You could have talked to me," I replied, desperation creeping into my voice. "You could have told me you were unhappy. Instead, you decided to run into the arms of other men." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't know if they were real or just a manipulation tactic. "I was trying to keep things together, but it felt like you didn't care. I needed someone to see me, to appreciate me." I stood up from the table, pacing the room as anger coursed through me. "You could have had that with me. Instead, you chose to throw it all away." The tension in the room reached a breaking point, and suddenly Ashley stood up too, her voice rising. "I'm not going to sit here and let you dictate how I feel or who I spend my time with. You think you can just control me with guilt?" "Control you?" I shouted back, frustration boiling over. "This isn't about control, this is about love, respect, and trust, things you've shattered." Her expression hardened. "You think you're some kind of saint? You've made mistakes too, Michael. You think I'm the only one who needs to be held accountable?" The accusation hit me like a punch to the gut. "What mistakes?" I demanded, my mind racing. "I had poured everything into our relationship. I've done everything to support you, and this is how you repay me? I've needed more than just your support. I needed a partner, she shouted, her voice echoing off the walls. Maybe if you'd actually been present, I wouldn't have needed someone else to fill that void. I felt the world closing in around me. I had dedicated my life to building a future for us, and now I stood in the rubble of that dream, watching it crumble at her feet. Before I could respond, she turned away, her frustration boiling over into tears. "You're impossible," she said, voice breaking. "I can't even talk to you anymore." Seeing her cry twisted something in me, a part of me wanting to comfort her despite everything. But the deeper truth lingered, she was the one who had betrayed my trust, and I couldn't simply brush it aside. "Maybe we need some time apart," I suggested, my voice low. "I can't keep doing this with you. I don't even know who you are anymore." Her gaze hardened, and I could see the fury behind her tears. "Fine. If that's what you want, then maybe you should take some time to reflect on your own failings, Michael." With that, she stormed out of the room, leaving me alone in the suffocating silence. I sat there for a moment, processing the chaos of our conversation. My heart ached, torn between the woman I loved and the betrayal I could no longer ignore. I knew I couldn't let this go. I had to fight for myself, for my sanity. I couldn't allow her to walk all over me, and I needed to gather my thoughts. I resolved to find the strength within me to reclaim my life, regardless of what it took. The battle wasn't over yet, it was just beginning. The aftermath of our explosive confrontation left me in a whirlwind of emotions. I spent days trying to piece together the remnants of my shattered trust while grappling with the realization that the woman I loved was capable of such betrayal. It was a painful process, one that felt like I was peeling back layers of a deceitful onion, revealing each new layer of hurt beneath. I knew I needed to gather more evidence, not just for my own clarity, but to prepare for whatever lay ahead. I didn't want to walk blindly into a battle without being armed with the truth. I began to think strategically. If Ashley was going to play games, I would be ready for her. First, I started by revisiting the conversations I had with mutual friends. I had always been open about my feelings for Ashley, and I had shared snippets of my concerns with a few trusted people. I reached out to them, seeking their perspectives and any insights they might have about her recent behavior. What I learned was both shocking and validating. Several friends mentioned that they had seen Ashley at various social events without me, laughing and engaging with men who were clearly more than just acquaintances. One friend recalled a night out where Ashley had been overly flirtatious with a group of guys, but they had brushed it off as harmless fun. "You know how she is," they said. "Always the life of the party." But now, in hindsight, those casual comments felt like daggers. My heart sank further with each revelation. It became clear that this wasn't just a single mistake, this was a pattern of behavior. I felt betrayed not only by Ashley but also by the friends who had witnessed it and remained silent. Armed with this new information, I knew I had to confront her again. But this time, I wouldn't approach it with anger. I wanted to come from a place of strength and clarity, not desperation. I began compiling all the evidence I had gathered, text messages, eyewitness accounts, and the conversations I had recorded. It was time to expose the truth and confront her once and for all. I decided to arrange a meeting in a neutral location, somewhere we could talk without the distractions of home. I chose a quiet cafe where we had shared many happy moments in the past, hoping to recapture some semblance of normalcy before we delved into the heart of the matter. When the day arrived, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination as I prepared for what lay ahead. Ashley arrived, looking stunning as always, but her expression was guarded. I could tell she sensed the tension in the air. "What's this about, Michael?" she asked, eyeing me suspiciously as we settled into a booth. "I wanted to talk about everything, about us," I began, trying to keep my voice calm. "I've been doing some thinking, and I have evidence that we need to address." She raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms defensively. "What kind of evidence?" I took a deep breath, pulling out my phone. "I've talked to some friends, and I know about your late-night outings and the conversations you've had with other men. I can't just sit here and pretend everything's fine anymore." Her eyes widened, and I saw the wheels turning in her mind. "You've been talking to people? You're spying on me now?" she shot back, her voice rising. "It's not spying, it's trying to understand what's happening in my marriage." I countered, my frustration spilling over. "I'm trying to piece together the truth because you've lied to me repeatedly. You have no idea how painful this is for me. Her facade began to crack, and I could see a flicker of guilt in her eyes. I didn't mean to hurt you, she admitted, her voice softer now. But I've felt so alone, and I didn't know how to reach you. By cheating on me? I asked, incredulous. You could have come to me. I would have listened. But instead, you chose to betray my trust. Michael, I know I messed up. I got caught up in things I shouldn't have, and I didn't think about the consequences, she said, her voice trembling. But I never meant to hurt you. I shook my head, struggling to reconcile the woman sitting across from me with the woman I had seen with those men. Ashley, you need to understand the gravity of your actions. This isn't just some mistake, you've shattered my trust. I don't know if I can forgive you for this. Tears filled her eyes as she looked down at the table, her emotions raw. I'm so sorry. I realize now how reckless I've been. But I love you, Michael. I don't want to lose you. I need time to think, I replied, feeling the weight of my emotions pressing down on me. This isn't something I can just brush off. We need to take a hard look at what we've built and whether we can ever rebuild it. The conversation felt like a bittersweet farewell. We parted ways that day, leaving so much unresolved. I could see the regret etched on her face, but I also felt the walls between us growing thicker. I didn't know if love alone could heal the wounds she had inflicted. That evening, I returned home and poured myself a glass of whiskey. The burn in my throat mirrored the ache in my heart. I was at a crossroads, forced to choose between a life of betrayal and the hope of rebuilding something real. As I sat in the quiet of our home, I knew one thing for sure: I wouldn't let Ashley's betrayal define my future. It was time to take back control. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions. I spent my days working, but my mind was consumed with thoughts of Ashley and the choices that lay ahead. Each time I returned home, the silence felt deafening. It was a stark reminder of the distance that had grown between us, a distance that felt insurmountable. I kept my distance from Ashley, focusing on work and trying to regain a semblance of normalcy. We had exchanged a few messages, but they were tinged with tension, each one a reminder of the fracture in our marriage. I knew that deep down, we were both grappling with the same questions: could we ever return to what we once had? Was love enough to mend what had been broken? One night, while I was going through some old family photos, I stumbled across a picture of us from our wedding day. The joy in our faces felt so genuine, so untouched by the turmoil that lay ahead. I couldn't help but reminisce about the early days of our marriage, how we laughed together, shared dreams, and supported one another. I remembered how I used to believe that nothing could tear us apart. But now, the weight of Ashley's betrayal pressed heavily on my chest. I felt a mix of anger and sorrow at how easily she had thrown away everything we had built. As I scrolled through the photos, I found myself questioning every moment, wondering if there had been signs I had missed, warning me that our foundation was built on sand. To clear my mind, I decided to visit a close friend, someone who had always offered sound advice. Over a couple of beers, I poured out my heart, sharing the details of the past few months, the late nights, the texts, the betrayal. My friend listened intently, nodding in understanding. "You deserve better than this, Michael," he said, his voice firm. "You've worked hard to build your life, and you shouldn't have to put up with being treated like this. You need to think about what you want moving forward." As I left his place that night, I felt a glimmer of clarity. I knew I had to confront Ashley again, but this time I wouldn't go in empty-handed. I decided to lay out the evidence I had gathered and present it to her. I needed her to understand the depth of her betrayal, not just for my sake, but for the future of our relationship. The following week, I scheduled another meeting with her at our favorite cafe. As I arrived, I felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. I knew this would be a pivotal moment, one that could either lead to healing or further devastation. When she walked in, her face lit up with surprise, but I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "Michael, what's going on?" she asked, sitting down across from me. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I want to get to the bottom of this once and for all. I need you to understand what your actions have done." She nodded, her expression serious. "I'm listening." I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the messages and evidence I had collected. "This isn't just about me being hurt. This is about the future of our marriage and whether we can rebuild trust. As I laid everything out, I watched her face change from surprise to guilt. The truth was hard to face, and I could see the impact of my words weighing on her. I didn't realize how much this would hurt you, she admitted quietly, her voice breaking. Because you weren't thinking about me, I said, my voice steady but tinged with sorrow. You were too caught up in your own needs and desires. You need to own that. The conversation unfolded like a carefully scripted drama, each revelation met with tears and regret. But as we talked, I felt the walls between us slowly starting to crumble. We both knew we had a long way to go, but for the first time, it felt like we were both willing to fight for what we once had. That night, I returned home feeling a flicker of hope. It was a small spark, but it was enough to ignite the possibility of change. I realized that this was a battle worth fighting, not just for our marriage, but for our own personal growth. I needed to forgive Ashley, not just for her sake, but for my own peace of mind. The weeks that followed were a tumultuous journey of introspection, communication, and painful honesty. Ashley and I agreed to meet regularly to discuss our feelings, our past, and what we hoped for in the future. Each conversation brought new challenges, forcing us to confront not just her betrayal but also my own shortcomings as a husband. During one of our sessions, Ashley revealed the extent of her loneliness. I know I made a terrible mistake, she said, tears streaming down her face. But I felt invisible in our marriage. I needed someone to see me, to appreciate me, and I lost my way. I'm sorry. Her vulnerability struck a chord within me, and for the first time, I truly listened. I realized that my focus on work had created a void in our relationship. I had been so consumed with building my business that I hadn't noticed how far apart we had grown. I began to understand that while her actions were unforgivable, they stemmed from a place of deep emotional pain. In our conversations, I opened up about my own struggles. I thought I was doing what was best for us, I admitted. But I neglected the emotional connection we once had. I took you for granted, assuming everything would stay the same. The weight of our shared truths began to lift the heaviness that had lingered in our home. It was a slow process, but we began to navigate the complicated landscape of rebuilding our relationship. We started to reconnect, sharing moments that had been lost, cooking together, watching movies, and even going for long walks. Each interaction felt like a fragile step toward healing. However, there were still moments of tension. Occasionally, I would catch her glancing at her phone, a flash of anxiety coursing through me. I realized I was still grappling with the shadows of her betrayal, and old wounds weren't easily healed. I'm trying to trust you again, I would say when those feelings bubbled to the surface. But it's hard. I understand, she would reply, her voice filled with sincerity. I know I have to earn back your trust. I'll do whatever it takes. Yet, just when I thought we were making progress, another setback emerged. One evening, I returned home from work to find Ashley sitting on the couch, her expression distant. I felt an instinctual surge of unease as I approached her. What's wrong? I've been thinking, she said slowly, her voice trembling. About my past. About the choices I made. My heart sank. What do you mean? I don't want to be the person who hurt you. I've realized that I need to take responsibility for my actions. But I also need to understand why I acted that way. I want to explore that, and it means confronting some painful truths. Are you saying you want to revisit those relationships? I asked, the words heavy on my tongue. No. It's not about them, she insisted. It's about me. I need to understand why I felt the need to seek validation outside of our marriage. I don't want to live in shame anymore. I want to learn from this. I felt the ground shift beneath me. I wanted to support her in her journey, but the thought of her delving into her past relationships made my stomach churn. I'm not sure I'm ready for that, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I know it's hard, she replied, reaching for my hand. But if we want to heal, we have to be willing to face the truth, no matter how painful it may be. The weight of her words hung in the air, and I realized that healing wasn't a linear path. It would be messy, complicated, and filled with emotional turbulence. But deep down, I knew that avoiding these discussions would only prolong the agony. If we were to move forward, we had to confront the past head-on. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about our journey. I was still hurt, but I felt a sense of determination rising within me. The road to healing would be long, but I was ready to face it, together. As the weeks turned into months, our relationship transformed in ways I had never anticipated. We learned to communicate more openly, and while there were still moments of doubt and insecurity, the foundation of our bond began to rebuild. It was during one of our late-night discussions that I finally broke through the walls of fear I had built around myself. "I've been thinking about the future," I admitted, my heart racing. "What do we want? What does our marriage look like moving forward?" Ashley looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and trepidation. "I want us to be stronger, to learn from this experience. I don't want to just go back to how things were. I want to create something new, something that reflects who we are now." It was a powerful moment, a realization that we both understood the gravity of our situation. We couldn't erase the past, but we could shape our future. "I want that too," I said, feeling the weight of my decision settle into my bones. "But it's going to take work. We'll need to be honest about our feelings, even when it's uncomfortable." Ashley nodded, her expression serious. "I'm willing to put in the effort. I know I have to earn back your trust, and I'm committed to doing that. I don't want to lose you again." Our commitment to one another began to manifest in small, meaningful ways. We started going on regular date nights, rediscovering the joy of spending time together. I found myself laughing more, feeling lighter as we ventured out into the world, hand in hand. With each outing, we built new memories to replace the painful ones. But even as we forged ahead, the past still lingered like a shadow. I had my moments of doubt. Whenever Ashley received a text or made plans without me, a familiar anxiety would creep in. One evening, while we were watching a movie, I noticed her phone buzzing on the coffee table. My heart raced as I tried to suppress the urge to check it. "Do you want to see who it is?" Ashley asked, sensing my tension. "No," I replied, forcing a smile. "I trust you. I just need to remind myself of that." She reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "I know it's hard. But I want you to feel secure in our relationship. If it helps, I can be more transparent about my plans." Her willingness to acknowledge my feelings meant everything. It was a step toward healing, a commitment to rebuilding trust. Yet, just when I thought we were on solid ground, an unexpected curveball hit. One afternoon, I was at the office when I received a text from an unknown number. It was a photo, Ashley with another man, laughing and looking carefree. My heart sank, a wave of panic crashing over me. I felt the blood drain from my face as I stared at the screen, the world around me fading into a blur. I had thought we were past this. I had trusted her, and yet here was undeniable proof that the shadow of betrayal still loomed. I didn't know who had sent the message or what it meant, but I felt the ground shift beneath my feet once more. I quickly gathered my things and left the office, racing home, my heart pounding in my chest. What was I going to say? How could I confront her without sounding accusatory? When I arrived home, I found Ashley in the kitchen, preparing dinner. The familiar scent of garlic and herbs filled the air, but all I could think about was the betrayal that threatened to unravel everything we had worked for. "Ashley!" I called out, my voice shaking. She turned, her expression shifting from surprise to concern. "Michael, what's wrong?" I pulled out my phone, showing her the image. "What is this? Why is there a photo of you with another man?" Her face went pale as she took the phone from my hand, staring at the screen in disbelief. "I don't know where that came from. I swear, I've been working hard to make this right. I'm not seeing anyone else. You expect me to believe that? After everything we've been through?" I felt the anger boiling over, the betrayal sharp and fresh in my mind. "I'm telling you the truth," she pleaded, her voice rising. "You have to believe me. That photo could have been taken any time. I'm not cheating on you." The chaos in my mind was overwhelming. Could it be a misunderstanding? Was someone trying to drive a wedge between us? I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the evidence felt damning. "Then who is this man?" I demanded, my voice echoing off the walls. "I don't know. I swear." "It could be anyone," she insisted, her eyes pleading for understanding. You have to trust me. But trust was a fragile thing, and right now, I felt it slipping through my fingers. How can I asked, my voice breaking. Every time I try to rebuild, something like this happens. I can't keep going through this pain, Ashley. Tears welled in her eyes as she stepped closer. I love you, Michael. I'm not perfect, but I'm trying to be better. I'm not going to let anyone come between us again. You have to believe that. Her desperation struck a chord within me, and I felt the walls of my anger beginning to crumble. I wanted to believe her, but the evidence felt insurmountable. I don't know how much more I can take, I admitted, my voice trembling. The tension in the room was thick, a heavy silence stretching between us. I could see the fear in her eyes, the vulnerability beneath the bravado. Let's figure this out together, she said, her voice softening. We'll get to the bottom of this, I promise. I took a deep breath, wrestling with my conflicting emotions. I didn't want to give up, but I needed answers. Okay, I said finally. But we need to find out who sent that photo and why. We can't let this destroy us again. With that, we began a new chapter in our journey, a commitment to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I felt a flicker of hope. Together, we would confront whatever demons awaited us. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions and uncertainty. Ashley and I spent hours discussing the photo, analyzing every detail and trying to understand how it had come to be. We reached out to friends, hoping to gain insight or, at the very least, to gather information on any suspicious behavior. The reality was painful, but we were both determined to get to the bottom of this mystery. We began by investigating the source of the text message. I reached out to my close friends, asking if they had seen Ashley out and about with anyone unusual. Each conversation was a mix of anxiety and dread, and I found myself bracing for any news that could further shatter the fragile trust we had been building. One of my friends mentioned seeing Ashley at a local bar a few weeks back, laughing and talking to a group of men, but he hadn't thought anything of it at the time. She seemed happy, he said, his voice apologetic. I didn't think much of it. She's your wife, man. I figured you knew. Each detail felt like a dagger, and I fought to keep my composure. I didn't know, and that's the problem, I admitted, my voice strained. I can't keep living in the dark. Ashley and I decided to confront the bar staff to see if they had any information about the evening my friend had mentioned. We walked into the bar, a dimly lit place with a relaxed atmosphere, but my heart raced as we approached the bartender. Hi, we're looking for information about a night my wife was here a few weeks ago, I said, trying to sound calm. Do you recall seeing her with anyone unusual? The bartender's brow furrowed as he thought back. I don't remember the specifics, but I do recall a group of people celebrating. It was pretty lively that night. He hesitated before adding, there was a guy who seemed overly interested in her, but I thought they were just friends. My heart dropped. What do you mean by overly interested? Just a lot of flirting, I guess, he replied, his tone neutral. But nothing out of the ordinary for a bar. It happens all the time. I felt the anger surge within me again. Do you have security footage from that night? I asked, desperate for answers. The bartender nodded. I can check. We keep recordings for a few weeks. As we waited for the footage, I turned to Ashley, my heart pounding. I can't believe this is happening. I thought we were past this. I know, she replied, her voice steady. But we need to find out the truth, no matter how painful. We can't keep living like this. When the bartender returned, he led us to a back room where the footage was stored. We watched together, holding our breaths as the clips played. The screen flickered, revealing moments of laughter, dancing, and conversation. And then, there it was, Ashley, radiant and carefree, surrounded by a group of men, one of whom stood out. My heart sank as I watched the same man lean in closer, whispering something in her ear while she laughed, brushing his arm casually. The footage felt like a punch to the gut, the weight of betrayal crashing down once more. I was just trying to have fun, Ashley said softly, her voice filled with regret. But I see now how it could be misconstrued. It looks like you were enjoying yourself a little too much, I said, trying to keep my anger in check. What were you thinking? I wasn't thinking about you. I was trying to forget how lonely I felt, she replied, tears streaming down her face. But it doesn't mean I was cheating. I was just lost. The emotions swirled within me, anger, sadness, confusion, but I knew this was a pivotal moment. I couldn't let this define us, but I also couldn't ignore the hurt. We need to talk about what this means for us, I said finally, my voice steady. We left the bar, the weight of the world heavy on our shoulders. The confrontation had unearthed deeper issues than just a moment of fun. As we walked to the car, I realized this was about more than infidelity, it was about understanding the voids in our relationship and how to fill them moving forward. I don't want to keep living like this, Ashley said, her voice breaking. I want to change. I want to be the wife you deserve. I want that too, I replied, feeling the tension between us shifting. But we need to learn from this. We need to focus on rebuilding trust and understanding what went wrong in the first place. That night, we sat down and poured our hearts out. We talked about our dreams, our fears, and the moments that had driven us apart. It was painful and raw, but it felt like we were finally uncovering the roots of our issues. I realized that the path ahead would not be easy, but we were committed to facing it together. As the days turned into weeks, we settled into a routine of open communication, emotional honesty, and vulnerability. It wasn't easy, but each conversation brought us closer to understanding the cracks that had formed in our marriage. Ashley began to open up about her struggles with self-worth. I've always felt like I needed to prove myself, she confessed during one of our talks. When I started my fashion line, it was like I finally had my own identity. But as I became more successful, I felt the pressure to maintain that image. And when you were busy, I didn't know how to cope. It led me down a dark path. Her words resonated deeply. I realized that I had also been wrapped up in my own struggles, pouring everything into my business while neglecting the emotional connection we had once cherished. I was so focused on providing for us that I forgot to be present, I admitted. I didn't notice how lonely you felt. I need to learn how to ask for help, she said, wiping her tears. I can't keep running away when things get tough. I need to talk to you instead of seeking validation elsewhere. It was a turning point for both of us. We began to establish boundaries, scheduling regular check-ins where we could share our feelings openly without fear of judgment. I found comfort in knowing that Ashley was committed to working on herself, and I was determined to support her in that journey. We also sought couples therapy, recognizing the importance of professional guidance in navigating our tumultuous emotions. Each session forced us to confront uncomfortable truths and encouraged us to communicate more effectively. Our therapist helped us identify the patterns that had led us to this point, guiding us in creating healthier dynamics. One afternoon, as we left therapy, I felt a sense of hopefulness that I hadn't experienced in a long time. I think we're really making progress, I said, smiling at Ashley. I can see a light at the end of the tunnel. I feel it too, she replied, her voice soft. I know we have a long way to go, but I believe we can get there together. Our commitment to healing wasn't without setbacks, of course. There were moments of doubt, times when the shadows of her betrayal crept back into my mind, threatening to overshadow our progress. But with each challenge, we grew stronger. One night, we decided to revisit the cafe where we had first confronted each other. As we sat down, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we had come since that painful evening. We ordered our favorite dishes, sharing laughs and stories, the atmosphere light and filled with warmth. Remember when we used to come here all the time? Ashley said, her eyes sparkling. It feels good to be back. It does, I agreed, a smile spreading across my face. I feel like we're finally finding our way back to each other. That night marked a new chapter in our journey, a chapter defined by resilience, growth, and a renewed commitment to one another. We learned to cherish the small moments, to laugh and love despite the scars that still lingered. As the weeks turned into months, we continued to build a future together, one conversation at a time. I found solace in knowing that love isn't just about the good times, it's about navigating the storms and emerging stronger on the other side. Ashley and I were rewriting our story, one filled with honesty, understanding, and the determination to overcome any obstacle together. Months passed, and the journey of healing became a testament to our commitment to one another. We learned to embrace vulnerability, using it as a strength rather than a weakness. As our relationship transformed, so did we as individuals. Ashley's fashion business flourished, and she began to find her footing, confident in her abilities. She was no longer seeking validation from others but rather embracing her talent and creativity. I watched with pride as she blossomed into the woman she had always wanted to be. In return, I focused on my business, but I made a conscious effort to prioritize our relationship. I learned to delegate more and carve out time to be present with Ashley. We started enjoying weekend getaways, exploring new places, and sharing adventures that brought us closer together. One sunny Saturday, we decided to take a spontaneous trip to the coast. We drove along the scenic highway, the ocean waves crashing against the shore, a perfect backdrop for our newfound connection. As we walked hand in hand along the beach, I marveled at how far we had come. The shadows of betrayal that once loomed over us were now distant memories, replaced by laughter and joy. "Can you believe how much has changed?" I asked, turning to her with a smile. "I can," she replied, her eyes sparkling with happiness. "We've worked so hard for this, and it's finally paying off. I'm so grateful for your patience." I pulled her closer, feeling the warmth of the sun on our skin. "I'm grateful too. It's been a long journey, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. We've emerged stronger together." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I realized that we were no longer defined by the mistakes of our past. Instead, we were forging a new path, one filled with love, trust, and a commitment to cherish one another. That evening, as we sat on the beach watching the waves roll in, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. We had faced the darkness and emerged into the light, stronger than before. I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, hand in hand, ready to embrace the future with open hearts. Our journey had taught us the importance of resilience, and I couldn't help but believe that our love had been reborn, stronger than ever. And in that moment, surrounded by the beauty of the ocean and the warmth of the setting sun, I knew we were on the cusp of a beautiful new beginning.